He was once the national LGBTQ plus face, the face that millions of Americans tuned in to watch every night, hailed as a pioneer for an entire generation of young people. And yet, practically overnight, he became the most hated TikToker in the platform's history, ruthlessly turned on, boycotted by the very community he claimed to represent. So, what the hell happened to Fuzzz99? Fuzzz99 is a name that, for several years running, made waves across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. The real name behind the persona is Mac Fanicos, born somewhere around 1995 or 1996. Mac is now 30 years old, living in the state of Massachusetts, northeastern United States. In the current TikTok bio, Mac sums himself up in a single sentence: just Mac from Massachusetts, 30 years old, and a little king. Mac identifies as a transmasculine content creator, meaning a creator who carries a transmasculine gender identity and uses he/they pronouns in English. For the past 6 years, Mac has openly, continuously shared his gender identity journey on social media, without hiding a thing. I want to underline this detail right from the start, because it's both the starting point and the central focus of this entire story. It all began on January 26, 2020, when Mac posted his very first TikTok video. That video was filmed inside his childhood bedroom, at his parents' house in Massachusetts. And here's the thing, folks. 6 years later, meaning the moment I'm sitting here putting this video together in 2026, that bedroom is still Mac's only filming location. In my view, this is a really telling detail, and I'll come back to it later, because it says a lot about the trajectory of this person's life. At the time the TikTok career kicked off, Mac was just 24 years old, juggling 2 part-time jobs at the same time. The first job? Substitute teacher in the public schools of Worcester, Massachusetts, mostly at the high school level. The second job? Counselor at a summer camp for teenagers between the ages of 12 and 18. 2 summers in a row. 2020 and 2021. Mac's early TikTok content centered on subjects very few creators dared to touch at the time. Things like LGBTQ plus education, breaking down complex gender terminology, omnisexual, pansexual, demi-boy, intersex, talking about queer history, walking viewers through how to bind safely as a transgender person, sharing personal experiences from his own transition process. Mac quickly captured the crowd's attention thanks to an extremely distinctive, one-of-a-kind performance style. Honestly, I have never seen anyone else do it quite the same way, on either TikTok or YouTube. Every single Mac video opened with the same formula. First came a hard, stomping foot, slammed onto the floor. Then Mac would lean in so close to the camera that you could practically count the pores on his face. Then he'd shout out his trademark catchphrase, fully loaded with energy: "I'm so glad you asked." His voice was so high-pitched I felt like my own headphones were suffering through it. His gestures, exaggerated like a Disney cartoon character that had just stepped off the screen. And his energy level, pinned at a 10 out of 10, in every single second, every single minute of every video. Mac referred to his fan community by a custom-made nickname, both cute and exclusive: Fuzzballs. Between mid-2020 and early 2022, Mac Fanicos took off like a rocket. The follower count climbed at an exponential pace. On July 7th, 2020, just 6 months after that first video, Mac scored his first viral hit. That video racked up over 342,000 views and 129,000 likes. For a brand new creator with no agency, no production crew, no advertising budget, that's genuinely impressive. And from that point forward, every couple of months, Mac would drop another viral banger. Fans flocked to Mac because they saw something in him that was very rare on social media in 2020 and 2021. They saw a trans-masked person who dared to live out loud, who dared to dress in unusual ways, who dared to answer every nosy question head-on without judgment, who dared to bring topics that usually got swept under the rug into the spotlight, with humor, youthfulness, and a relentlessly positive energy. At the time, this was something very few American creators were willing to do. The revenue followed suit and shot up rapidly. Mac added Instagram, opened a YouTube channel, plastered affiliate links everywhere, and put both Venmo and Cash App right there in the bio to take fan donations. Wherever he went, he got cheered, he got recognized. In his videos, Mac frequently told stories about times when the high school students he was substitute teaching had spotted him out in the wild. Some students wrote his TikTok handle on the whiteboard in class. Some students walked up to him in the hallway, asking for a photo, asking for an autograph. Some students even slipped him vape pens. A small but fiercely loyal fan base gradually formed around Mac. The vast majority of them? LGBTQ plus teenagers, kids who were still in the process of figuring themselves out, wrestling with questions about their gender and sexuality. They found in Fuzzz99 an older brother, a friend, a mentor that they didn't have access to in real life. For so many of these young people, especially those living in conservative rural pockets of America like Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Mac was genuinely a lifeline for their mental health. I think this point really matters, folks, because it explains why Mac still has such a loyal fan community to this day, even after the entire internet has turned against him. Based on my own analysis, the key to Mac Fanicos' success during this period came down to two main factors. The first factor, the sheer uniqueness of his personal brand. Back in 2020 and 2021, nobody on TikTok was doing LGBTQ plus educational content in that high drama style the way Mac was. Most other queer creators chose to tell their stories softly, to make everyday vlogs, or to cook up witty comedy skits. Mac, on the other hand, picked a totally different lane. Mac turned every single video into a Broadway stage performance. The movements? Exaggerated. The shouting? Loud enough that the neighbors could probably hear. The way he expressed himself? Some people called it over the top. Fans called it iconic. This style sparked controversy from day one. But that very controversy ended up being the engine that pushed the TikTok algorithm to send his videos further. The more people hated him, the more views the videos racked up, the more they got stitched, the more viral they went. This was the genius move, or the suicide move, depending on how you look at it. The second factor? The unconditional openness about his personal life. Mac kept nothing hidden, from the transition, to the chest binding, to the menstrual cycle while still being mid-transition, to family rejection, to his partner, to his pet cat, to his relatives' weddings, all the way down to buying his first suit. Everything was broadcast live to TikTok, under the hashtag #GenderAdventure. Every time he changed his hairstyle into what he called a spooky haircut or a jolly haircut, and depending on the season, Mac turned it into a major event. Every time a stranger correctly used his pronouns, Mac celebrated it like he had just won an Oscar. This radical level of intimacy created a near best friend bond between Mac and his most loyal fuzzballs. And this is exactly the bond that would later become his only remaining lifeline, when the rest of the world turned its back on him. Within 2 years, Mac had hit 450,000 followers. He had brand deals with LGBTQ plus companies. He had invitations to podcasts and talk shows. A full-time influencer career was steadily taking shape. Mac was even seriously considering walking away from his substitute teaching gig altogether to pour everything into TikTok. At the peak, Mac was arguably one of the most influential trans-mass creators in America on the platform. And when I say influential, I want you to understand that in this very specific sense. This was the person that parents in conservative states like Texas, Florida, Tennessee were terrified of their kids watching every night. This was the person that veteran LGBTQ plus activists had to hold meetings about to debate whether or not he should be officially recognized as a face of the community. And this was also the person that conservative politicians kept dragging out as Exhibit A for what they called the Gen Z problem. By 2022, Fuzzz99 was no longer just a TikToker. He had become a cultural phenomenon, a name that turned up in the national debate over transgender rights in America. But then, everything started to veer off course. And the cause didn't come from any one big shock. It came from a chain of small decisions that Mac himself didn't even register the danger of at the time. Underneath the glossy shell of a creator at the top of his game, an uncomfortable truth was slowly leaking out. And then, almost overnight, the whole thing flipped. All of TikTok started to realize one thing. The problem with Fuzzz99 wasn't just that the style was annoying, it was something deeper, something far more disturbing. Specifically, on August 23, 2022, Mac posted a video responding to a troll comment that asked whether he knew how to brush his teeth. This was supposed to be a light, fun comeback, but the video blew up beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Over 2.5 million views, 38,000 likes, and instead of helping Mac expand his fan base, it cracked open a whole new era, the era of the haters. 2 weeks later, on September 6, 2022, Mac followed up with a video explaining why he had to lock down the comments section. The reason Mac gave? He couldn't take the hatred from the homophobes anymore. That video racked up 14 million views and 195,000 likes. And this was the moment that decided his entire career. The TikTok algorithm had officially flagged Fuzzz99 as a cringe creator, meaning a creator that triggered a high level of secondhand embarrassment. From that point forward, Mac's content stopped being pushed to fans. Instead, it got pushed to non-fans, to the people who specifically clicked in just to criticize, to mock, to stitch. But hold on, folks, it didn't stop there. On September 14th, 2022, a TikToker by the name of @Simba11 posted a stitch with Mac, telling him flat out that he should just delete his account already, to spare the community the trouble. Within a single week, that video pulled in 3.7 million views and 724,000 likes. At this point, things still hadn't reached full disaster status, but that was only the opening shot. The peak hit on October 17th, 2022. Another TikToker, going by @CrustyToilet, posted a stitch mocking Mac. And that video detonated, in the literal sense of the word. 22.3 million views, 3.9 million likes, all within a span of just 3 days. On the same day, over on Twitter, a user with the handle @SCR1Blez posted a photo of Mac with a caption saying that this was one of the 2 worst TikTok accounts on the entire platform. And it wasn't the second one. Within 4 days, that tweet had collected 3,700 retweets and 77,300 likes. By this point, American social media had officially declared war on Fuzzz99. Public reaction at that moment was like a hurricane. Furious comments swamped every comments section that hadn't been locked down yet. Old fans switched lanes, without a hint of mercy. To give you a sense of how intense it got, let me quote a few representative comments. One person wrote, point blank, "If Mac shows up on my For You page one more time, I swear to God, the outcome will not be pretty." Another person wrote, "Mac is making the entire LGBTQ+ community embarrassed." And here's the part that I think really matters, folks. The people criticizing Mac the hardest, the most viciously, were not conservative straight people. They were members of the LGBTQ+ community itself. Actual gay, lesbian, trans, and queer people. The very people Mac claimed he was representing. They put out a whole wave of videos to lay out one very clear point. Mac's content wasn't helping the LGBTQ+ rights movement. Just the opposite. It was actively doing damage. Mac was turning being gay into cheap entertainment. Mac was reinforcing all the negative stereotypes the community had spent decades trying to dismantle. And if you think that was already bad enough, hold on, because there's more. The second scandal exploded out of the very content Mac had been posting for years. People started digging back through the old videos, and what they found was a really alarming pattern. Mac had a habit of referring to his students using the phrase, "my gay kids." That word choice was extremely possessive, as if those kids actually belonged to him. In the videos about summer camp, Mac told one story in great detail. It was about how the campers, who were only 9 or 10 years old, had picked the rainbow flag as their team's symbol, after Mac himself had introduced them to the various pride flags. The accompanying caption? I love them so much," with pride flag emojis. In another video, Mac told a story about a student in the school art club who asked Mac to face paint them. After that, Mac posted photos of that child up on social media. In yet another video, Mac talked about students recognizing him in the school hallway, and the whole group fist-bumping, hugging, celebrating. Mac called these kids my gay children. Each of these things, taken on its own, might not be a big deal, but when you line them all up next to each other, the bigger picture starts to look very questionable in a lot of people's eyes. Don't forget, Mac is a creator producing content about sexuality and gender identity for the public. Add to that the extremely childlike, exaggerated communication style. Add to that the fact that Mac was working as a substitute teacher at a high school. When you stack all those factors together, the whole thing starts to make viewers feel genuinely uncomfortable. The third scandal really laid bare the hypocrisy in how Mac had built his personal brand. Here was a person who claimed to represent tolerance, love, acceptance of every gender and every sexual orientation. And yet, this was the same person who was constantly posting videos that attacked straight people. There were videos where Mac would ask out loud, "Who would even want to be straight?" Mac called straight people boring, limited, and lacking any real culture worth mentioning.
Meaning you can identify as a male, but use she, her pronouns if that's what you like.
There were videos where Mac would sneer about how awful it must be that straight couples never have to worry about holding hands or kissing in public. When called out for being straight-phobic, Mac fired back with a line that I genuinely could not believe. Mac said, "My content is for the gays, not for the streets." This was the moment when the LGBTQ+ community really started to back away from Mac. Because, as another queer creator laid out very clearly, reverse discrimination is still discrimination. Speaking up for equality does not give you a license to turn around and become a bigot toward another group of people. And then, the ugly truth came down hard. In late September and early October of 2022, an extraordinarily serious wave of accusations exploded across TikTok, Reddit, and Twitter. Mac was being accused of grooming children. The English term, of course, is grooming. Multiple accounts threw out multiple different accusations. Some said Mac was deliberately producing content designed to attract minors. Some said Mac was using his position as a substitute teacher to get close to students. Others said Mac had been having inappropriate conversations with certain minors. Petitions popped up on Reddit and change.org with the single goal of getting TikTok to permanently ban Mac from the platform. Those petitions racked up thousands of signatures very quickly. This was, genuinely, the darkest hour in Mac's entire career. I want to pause right here to underline something that's extremely important, folks. As of right now, May 2026, there has not been a single piece of concrete evidence published that proves the grooming accusations against Mac are true. No victim has come forward publicly. No private messages have leaked. No charges have been filed by police. No verdict has come down from any court. I think this is a point that absolutely has to be said out loud and clearly, because grooming is an extremely serious accusation, and spreading it without credible evidence can absolutely destroy a person's life. In fact, even quite a few queer creators stepped up to defend Mac on this specific point, even though they themselves still didn't accept his style at all. They said it very clearly. Calling someone a sexual predator without credible evidence is a wrongful act, no matter how much you hate that person, because an accusation like that can ruin their life. It can lead to them being attacked in real life. It can even get them killed. That said, that doesn't mean Mac didn't do anything wrong, folks. The way Mac handled this crisis, to put it bluntly, drove the situation straight into the ground. He should have apologized sincerely. He should have stepped back and reassessed his content. He should have admitted that this style really was making a lot of people uncomfortable, and that maybe it was time for a change. But Mac chose the exact opposite path.
I really hate to come on here to make this video.
Mac posted a video announcing that he would be leaving TikTok for a while. The explanation he gave? The police are advising me to temporarily withdraw from the platform. That single statement, even to this day, remains a major mystery, folks. Which police, specifically? Which city's police department? Why would the police be involved? Was there some kind of investigation being opened? Mac has never answered a single one of those questions. And it was that very vagueness that caused the conspiracy theories to explode even harder. Some people believed the police involvement was directly tied to the grooming accusations. Others believed this was just a cheap stunt to fish for sympathy. And still others believed Mac was simply lying outright about the police. But the bad news still wasn't done piling up, folks. In November 2023, exactly 1 year after the first wave of public outrage broke out, Mac Fanicos was officially fired from his position as a substitute teacher at Worcester Public Schools. Mac posted a 20-minute YouTube video.
It ultimately led to me being fired from my job as a high school substitute teacher.
To lay out the entire story from his own version of events. In that video, Mac framed himself as the victim of a hate crime. Mac claimed that some anonymous person had emailed the school's HR department, attaching old thirst trap photos. Those photos had been taken back in 2020, meaning before Mac had ever started teaching. And according to Mac, those photos were the only reason he had lost his job, simply because Mac was gay. Mac cried on camera. Mac talked about the injustice happening to him. Mac called on the entire LGBTQ+ community to rise up in support. But life isn't a fairy tale, folks. According to insider sources from the school itself, combined with later investigations that several YouTubers analyzed in great depth, the truth was a lot more complicated than the story Mac told. Mac wasn't fired for being gay. Mac wasn't fired over the old photos. Mac was fired because he had been continuously violating the school's code of conduct for an entire year leading up to that point. Based on what's been revealed as far back as September 2022, Worcester Public Schools' HR department had already pulled Mac in for a meeting over 2 specific issues. The first issue had to do with the freshman students writing Mac's TikTok handle on the whiteboard in class. HR wanted to verify whether Mac was self-promoting his personal brand on the job. That kind of behavior is strictly forbidden for public school teachers in Massachusetts. The second issue had to do with an incident at the school's art club. That day, Mac had face-painted some of the students and then posted those photos to his personal social media. The school assessed that this behavior was inappropriate for a teacher, and that it blurred the professional boundary between teacher and student. In that meeting, the administrators told Mac something very directly that I think really matters. They said that what Mac was posting represented the entire school's image. They were not, at any point, telling Mac he wasn't allowed to be trans or queer. That was not what they meant. What they were saying was that Mac couldn't simultaneously be a substitute teacher and a social media influencer whose own students were watching his content every single day. And then, what was bound to happen eventually happened. In November 2023, the tip-off email from the anonymous sender finally arrived at the school, attaching the old thirst trap photos. But that email was not the actual reason Mac got fired. It was just the final straw. After more than a year of repeated rule violations that the school had documented thoroughly in his file, Mac was suspended immediately following that HR meeting. A few of the school's art teachers actually wrote letters defending Mac, trying to get him reinstated because they genuinely cared about him on a personal level. But the final decision had already been made, and Mac's biggest mistake, in my opinion, was that he never once admitted the real reason behind the firing. Mac kept pushing the hate crime narrative. Mac actually used that same story as content material for months afterward. Mac turned himself into a permanent victim. And that was the moment a lot of people in the LGBTQ+ community really started to back away. As many of them put it, very directly. Using a queer identity to dodge personal accountability doesn't just hurt Mac. It also makes it that much harder for actual LGBTQ+ people who really are facing real-world discrimination to be believed when they speak up. Now, even though Mac Fanicos is currently trying to scrub his image clean by posting more positive, less dramatic TikTok videos, sometimes even dropping emotional videos about mental health and recovery, the audience's trust has already shattered into pieces, folks. So what's the price tag on all this? I'm sitting here looking at Mac's TikTok page in May 2026, and honestly, the picture is genuinely heartbreaking. 457,000 followers. On the surface sounds impressive, but the engagement rate has collapsed to around 2.91%. For a creator with nearly 500,000 followers, that number is alarmingly low. And if you dig deeper, the picture gets even sadder. Roughly 27% of those 457,000 followers are most likely either bot accounts or accounts that have been inactive for a long time. That means the actual count of real, still following fans is more like 300,000. And even within that 300,000, most of them haven't watched any of Mac's content in a very long time. They've either forgotten that they ever followed him in the first place, or they only click in for a hate watch whenever one of Mac's videos randomly pops up on their For You page. Mac's Instagram account, after spending years on private, has finally been reopened. But you know how many followers Mac has over there? A grand total of 11,000. That's a stunningly bad number for someone who has nearly 500,000 fans on TikTok. And what about the personal YouTube channel? That is the clearest possible sign of how badly Mac's actual loyal fan base has shrunk. Because when a creator can't drag his fans from TikTok to literally any other platform, that means the vast majority of his TikTok followers were just curious passers-by, checking in for a look. Or, even worse, they were haters following along just to laugh. They were not real fans who actually wanted to consume the content Mac was making. Mac still posts almost every day, still uses that same childhood bedroom as his only filming location, still stomps, still shouts, still drops the catchphrase, "I'm so glad you asked."
I'm glad you asked.
It's like Mac figured out the formula for success back in 2020, and his brain just stopped developing from that moment on. There's no growth, there's no evolution. There's not a sliver of self-awareness that this style went stale years ago. Everything is exactly the same as it was 6 years ago, with one single difference. No one is watching anymore. Mac is 30 years old now, 30 years old, with no stable job, still living with his parents, still posting videos from inside his own childhood bedroom, still screaming into the void, all in pursuit of a validation that he hasn't been receiving for years now. This is the final stage of a really dangerous form of performance addiction. It's what happens when you become so dependent on the validation of strangers on the internet. So dependent that you literally can't stop performing anymore. Even when that performing is slowly destroying your own life. Even when no one is bothering to press play on your videos anymore. Even when the very community you're trying to represent has completely turned its back on you. I think the lesson of this story, not just for Mac, but for all of us living through the social media age, is this. If you become too addicted to performing yourself, too dependent on the likes and the comments, too lost in the social media character to remember how to live like a normal human being, you will end up exactly like Fuzzz99, posting for an audience that nobody cares about, rejected by the very community you tried to represent, and trapped in a loop you can't escape from. Maybe back in 2020, Mac genuinely wanted to help people, genuinely wanted to make a difference, genuinely wanted to use his platform for something good, but somewhere along the way, the platform started to matter more than the message, the attention started to matter more than the education, and the ego ended up swallowing every value Mac had ever claimed to stand for. So, what do you all think about the story of Mac Fanicos, the person the entire internet knows as Fuzzz99? Does someone who has been making mistakes nonstop for 6 straight years, who has refused every single chance to look in the mirror, who has constantly blamed everyone else instead of taking responsibility for his own actions, deserve another chance? Or is this genuinely the inevitable price tag for an unbroken chain of bad decisions? Should we feel sympathy for a young person who got lost in a fake spotlight, or should we treat this as the fair consequence for someone who never once chose to make things right? Drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.